welcome to the Basic and Clinical Science Anesthetic course. I'm Dr. Alsina from Madrid, Spain, Hospital Universitario La Paz. I'm the chair of the BCAS-SAC committee. My talk of today is the maternal physiology. I don't have any conflict of interest. And let's start with the physiology of pregnancy. Pregnancy is associated with major changes through the body. These are caused by hormonal factors and also because of mechanical changes due to the enlarged uterus and the enlarged fetus. The hormonal changes that are more implied with anesthesia are the progesterone ones, because they cause a smooth muscle relaxation that cause vasodilatation, bronchodilation, dilatation of the renal tract, and slow the gastrointestinal tract motility. It's also thermogenic. It causes the nausea and vomiting, and they decrease the requirements of anesthetics. As you see at the beginning of the pregnancy, there is the human chorionic gonadotropin working, and then is the estrogens and progesterone that remain during the rest of the pregnancy. Those changes mediated by hormones are not reversed immediately. They are still going on 3 to 4 weeks after delivery. Let's talk now about the orthocaval compression. This is what happens when the fetus and the uterus fall over when the mother lies down. They fall over the inferior vena cava and the aortus, and it can have a decrease in fall in the blood pressure or even a shock. It starts very early in the pregnancy, around 13 weeks. It's very important at 20 weeks and is maximal at the end of the gestation. As you see here, what we have to do is to tilt mothers to the left around 15 degrees to relieve that pressure. You can see it in the draw that when the mother lies down, there is a compression in the inferior vena cava and the aorta, and when we do the left tilt position, there is a relief on that pressure. And now there are several publications that talk about using ultrasound evaluation of the inferior vena cava compression to tilt more those parturients that can be in shock. What other cardiovascular changes we can find? Well, we find an increase, a high increase in the cardiac output through the gestation. Around the 20 weeks, there is an increase in 50% of the cardiac output. There is also an increase in the stroke volume, but in a lesser extent, 25%, and in the heart rate. So they are tachycardic, 25%. It is more prone around 20 weeks. There is also an increase in the ejection fraction, but in contrast, there is a decrease in the systemic vascular resistance that they will be reflected on reduced blood pressure around 10% in the systolic and more prone in the diastolic. There is also a displacement of the heart and the up and left, and the EKG we can see ST depression or T wave flat with no meanings. Is mostly because of the change in the place of the heart. What happens during labor? Well, during labor, the cardiac output increases even more, around 20 to 50% more, and even more at the delivery. That's because of the sympathetic activity increase and because of the transfusion from the placenta to the mother between contractions. This is very important when we have a mother with a cardiac disease, and these changes can be attenuated if we use the epidural analgesia. The respiratory changes are also very important. As you see in the draw, there is an upward displacement of the diaphragm, and also there is an increase in the thoracic cage diameter. So we see an increase in 5 to 7 centimeters of the diameter. The flattering of the ribs, it also contributes, and also the enlarging breath size that will compress also the lungs. Another important point for us, for anesthesia, is the airway mucosal edema. Generalized mucosal edema that is very important at the end, and it can have problems during the intubation. Other respiratory changes in the functional respiratory curves, we see there is an increase in the tidal volume, around 45%, increase in the minute ventilation, because of the tidal volume, but there is a decrease in the CRF and in the residual volume because what we said, the elevated diaphragm. So there is a decrease here, and an increase in the vital tidal volume. There is also an important increase in the oxygen consumption, and this is because the metabolic demands of the fetus and the placenta. And that will be very important if we have the mother with low oxygenation, because the oxygen will drop very quick. What about the arterial blood gas during the pregnancy? Well, the PaO2 is over 100, but the CO2 is smaller, is 28 to 33 millimeters of mercury. This will be compensated with decreasing bicarbonate levels and an increase in production of 2,3-DPG. The P50 here of the oxyhemoglobin group curve of the maternal hemoglobin is turned to the right, that to assure the oxygen delivery to the fetus. Other changes during pregnancy are the hematological changes. Mothers live with a physiological anemia. That means that they have an increase in the red blood cell volume around 20 to 30%, but the plasma volume increased in higher degree to 50%. So there is a dilution of those cells that we have in the blood. So we will find a decrease in the hemoglobin and the hematocrit. Also, we will find an increase in white cell count, an increase in fibrinogen, and the clotting factors, except 11 and 13. Sometimes we can find also a decrease in platelet because of the increase in the activity needed and the consumption. The coagulation tests are normal, and we find reduced fibrinolysis. The plasmatic changes are very important also because we have a protein concentration decrease because there is an increase in the plasma volume, a very high increase in plasma volume. So they are diluted. The albumin decrease, the globulin and fibrinogen increase, and that will lead us to a decrease in the colloid osmotic pressure, decrease in the binding capacity of drugs, and for example, we can find a decrease in pseudocholinesterase around 20 to 25% at term. We have to take that into account. What about the renal function? Well, I said before that progesterone causes dilatation and atony of the renal collective system, so they will have more urinary tract infections. There is an increase in the red blood, renal blood flow, and an increase in the glomerular filtration rate. So we will find decrease in plasma concentration, as we say, decrease in osmolality, and we can find proteinuria that can be normal until 300 milligrams per day, and glucosuria. There is also an an upregulation of the renal and renin-aldosterone system because the increase on the angiotensin II. In the draw, you see what happens to the stomach when the baby is growing. The displacement of all organs to the upright, it will increase the intragastric pressure. It will double the intragastric pressure. But the problem is that the barrier pressure, that is the lower esophageal sphincter pressure minus the gastric pressure, is reduced. So what happens to these mothers? That they have pyrosis around 55 to 80% of mothers. And the gastroesophageal reflux is because this pressure barrier is reduced. So they have also increase in the gastrin and in the pH. But what about the gastric emptying? The emptying is not delayed. We will find a delay in the emptying only during labor, and particularly if we use opioids. This is a question that is often in the test around the anesthesia exams. Okay, so there will be pyrosis because of the reduce of the barrier pressure. There is an increase in gastrin and decrease in the pH, but the emptying is not delayed. When we find the central nervous system changes, what we find is that the epidural space, it have an epidural pressure increase, and the epidural veins are vasodilated and engorged. There is also an increase in the sympathetic tone, but we have less local anesthetic requirements. There is also changes in the motility of different joints because of the relaxing hormone, and we have an exaggerated lumbar lordosis that will make us very difficult or more difficult the anesthesia, the regional anesthesia in this woman. Let's change now to the uteroplacental flow. Well, we have two umbilical arteries coming from the baby to release CO2 and waste. And we have one umbilical vein from the mother that will release oxygen and nutrients to the baby. Okay, two umbilical arteries and one umbilical vein. The flow in this, the uterine blood flow increased to 700 milliliters per minute. So the cardiac output that goes to the uterus comes from 3% to 12% at term. But this flow has limited autoregulation. That means that there is a decreased response to vasoconstrictors, and they are related to the systemic hypotension and other vasoconstrictions like preeclampsia or uterine contractions. So we have to be aware of that when we anesthetize this woman. How the substance go through the placenta? Well, they can go through the placenta by passive diffusion, and that's right for water, electrolytes, free fatty acids, steroids, vitamins, alcohol, oxygen, and CO2. That follows the Fick law of diffusion that you have to know by heart for the exam. That means that the flow will be constant times the area times the difference between maternal and fetal concentration divided by the thickness of the diffusion membrane. There is also a transfer of substance by facilitated diffusion like glucose. There is also active transport for amino acids, vitamins, calcium, iron, iodine, and also endocytosis. There's a last mechanism to transfer substance, that is the break that we can find in the placental membrane. And that allows mixing of the maternal and fetal blood and underlies the RH sensitizations during the pregnancy. What other factors affect the placental drug transfer? Well, first is the maternal drug concentration, and what depends what are the factors that related to the maternal drug concentration. The route of administration, there's always a higher dose if we use it intravenous. Epidural and intramuscular are similar. And in which tissue we are administering the drug, because not all tissues have the same vascularization. Also, it depends on the total maternal dose and the volume of distribution and drug metabolism. In the other side, we have the fetal drug concentrations, because we say that one of the factors that will apply to the mechanism of drug through the placenta are the difference between fetal and maternal concentration. The fetus will eliminate the drug not very efficient. So there is some transfer of drug back to the mother, and there is less plasma protein binding and less enzyme systems that will metabolize the drugs. Another factor to be aware of is the maternal fetal pH. We should know now that only the non-ionized form of a drug, it will cross membranes. So depending on the pK of the drug that we administer, and we will have more ionized or non-ionized form of drug. So the local anesthetics, they have a pK very close to the blood pH. So they are mostly in the non-ionized form, and they will go, they will diffuse very readily to the fetus. But once they are in the fetus, if the fetus is acidotic, because it has some bradycardia or whatever happened to the fetus, they will increase the ionization of the drug that we administer. So it will be retained on that side of the placenta, and it will not be able to equilibrate with the maternal circulation, and there will be the ion trapping of the basic drugs. And that's very important because increased toxicity of the local anesthetics during labor. Also, another factor is the protein binding capacity. And the drugs that are highly plasma protein bound, like bupivacaine, will have less transfer to the fetus compared with those with lower plasma protein, like lidocaine and mepivacaine. And now there is one question. How is it possible for a fetus to obtain enough oxygen when we have a PaO2 of around 30 millimeters of mercury? Well, there is some difference in the fetal oxygen transport that assures that they have enough oxygen with that low oxygen partial pressure. That means the first reason is because the fetal hemoglobin, the fetus has hemoglobin F around 75 to 80% of their blood. And this has a left curve according to the hemoglobin A, that is the adult one. The P50 of the fetal blood is 19 to 21, whereas the mother P50 is 27. Let's see here, 19 to 27. So the fetus will trap the oxygen that it gets to the fetus, and the mother will take off the oxygen to the fetus. There is also higher concentration of the hemoglobin, higher hematocrit, and also the third reason is the Bohr effect. What is the Bohr effect? Well, it is the effect on the pH, the effects that has the pH on the affinity of the hemoglobin for oxygen. What that means? Well, if we decrease the pH, acidic, because an increase in CO2, you know that an increase in CO2 will decrease the pH. There will be a right shift of the oxyhemoglobin curve. So there will be offloading of oxygen, okay? But what happens in the other side? If the pH increase, that means when the fetus is giving their CO2, the affinity for oxygen is increased. So they favors the oxygen uptake. So there is the double Bohr effect. You can see here, I think clearly, the CO2 from the fetus to the mother. So the fetus increase their pH. So increase the fetal oxygen affinity. So that's the Bohr effect. So, but the CO2 transfer from the fetus decrease the maternal pH and decrease the maternal affinity. So in one side, increase the fetal oxygen affinity, and in the other side, decrease the maternal oxygen affinity. So that's the double Bohr effect, and it's the same. It's because of the pH of the maternal blood or the fetal blood. The carbon dioxide is similar. Well, the placental membrane is very, very permeable to CO2, around 20 times more than oxygen. And we can find carbon dioxide dissolved, bond to bicarbonate ion, or in carbon hemoglobin groups. What happens is when the fetus takes the oxygen, release CO2, and that's the Haldane effect. As the fetal hemoglobin takes the oxygen, release CO2. And also, as the maternal gives up oxygen to the fetus, increase their affinity for CO2. So that's the double Haldane effect. That is very similar to the Bohr effect. This is the Haldane effect accounts for 46% of the transplacental transfer of CO2. Well, let's say right now that pregnancy is a very complicated physiological state. As you say, every tissue, every organ is affected by the pregnancy. And when we have to anesthetize, we have two lives under our responsibility. This is the books that I will recommend you to read if you want to go further in the obstetric anesthesia. This is very good for the practice, and this is the Chestnut Obstetric Anesthesia is very good for everything, for the basics, physiological, and the practice. And this is also very good, the Morgan Clinical Anesthesiology. So thank you very much. I hope to see you in my hospital in Madrid, and enjoy the course.